Long before Lake Lanier existed, the land was home to the Cherokee Nation. The Cherokee were one of the largest Native American tribes in the Southeast. They had lived in this region for thousands of years. Their territory once covered parts of Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas. The area that would become Forsyth County was part of their ancestral lands. The Cherokee had a rich and complex culture. They were skilled farmers, hunters, and craftspeople. They lived in permanent towns with sophisticated systems of government. Their society was matrilineal, with women playing important roles in leadership. The Cherokee had their own written language, developed by Sequoyah in the early 19th century. This allowed them to preserve their history and traditions in writing. The Cherokee way of life was deeply connected to the land. They saw themselves as stewards of the natural world, not its owners. The land that would later be flooded by Lake Lanier was part of this sacred landscape. In 1828, gold was discovered in Dahlonega, Georgia. This discovery would change everything for the Cherokee. The area, part of Cherokee territory, suddenly became very valuable to white settlers. The Georgia gold rush began, bringing thousands of prospectors to the region. They came with dreams of striking it rich, but their dreams would come at a great cost to the Cherokee people. The influx of gold seekers put enormous pressure on Cherokee lands. Prospectors illegally entered Cherokee territory, ignoring tribal sovereignty. The state of Georgia, eager to claim the gold for itself, began pushing for Cherokee removal. They passed laws stripping the Cherokee of their rights and land. The federal government, under President Andrew Jackson, supported these efforts. Jackson, a longtime advocate of Indian removal, saw an opportunity to push the Cherokee west. The Cherokee Nation resisted these efforts. They tried to assert their rights through legal means. The tribe took their case to the U.S. Supreme Court. In Worcester v. Georgia in 1832, the court ruled in favor of Cherokee sovereignty. The Trail of Tears is one of the most shameful episodes in American history. It refers to the forced relocation of the Cherokee and other Native American tribes. In 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act. This law gave President Jackson the power to negotiate removal treaties. The Cherokee, along with the Chickasaw, Choctaw, Muskogee, and Seminole, were targeted for removal. Despite the Supreme Court's ruling, pressure on the Cherokee intensified. In 1835, a small faction of Cherokee signed the Treaty of New Echota. This treaty ceded all Cherokee lands east of the Mississippi to the U.S. government. Most Cherokee, including Principal Chief John Ross, opposed the treaty. They argued it was fraudulent, but the U.S. government used it as justification for removal. In 1838, the U.S. government began forcibly removing the Cherokee from their homes. Soldiers rounded up Cherokee families at gunpoint. They were forced into internment camps before being marched west. The journey to Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma, was long and brutal. In the wake of the Cherokee removal, new communities began to take shape. One of these was Oscarville. Oscarville was a predominantly African-American town that emerged in what is now Forsyth County. It was named after Oscar Lindsay, a former slave who became a prominent local landowner. Oscarville represented a unique chapter in the area's history. Oscarville was established in the late 19th century, during the Reconstruction era. It was a time of hope and opportunity for many African Americans. Former slaves and their descendants were able to purchase land and build communities of their own. Oscarville grew into a thriving town with its own schools, churches, and businesses. It was a place where African Americans could live with a degree of autonomy and self-determination. The residents of Oscarville built a strong, close-knit community. They supported each other through the challenges of life in the segregated South. The town had its own economy with Black-owned farms and businesses. Education was highly valued in Oscarville. Oscarville was the site of a significant and tragic event in 1912. In September 1912, a white woman named Ellen Grice claimed that two black men were in her bed and attempted to assault her while she was sleeping. Shortly after, another white woman, May Crow, was allegedly attacked and put into a coma, which she died 3 weeks later and was never able to identify a suspect. During this time, several black men were arrested. Two black teenagers, Ernest Knox and Oscar Daniel, were accused of the attack and death of May Crow. Grant Smith, a black minister who attempted to help the falsely accused and to bring some sense of justice. Grant Smith tried to mediate and protect his community. His argument was that maybe Ellen Grice was involved with one of the men, which did not sit well with the white locals. Grant Smith was targeted by white mobs for his attempts to intervene. He was seized by a mob, brutally beaten, and subsequently killed. Ernest Knox, a 16-year-old, was arrested first. Under intense pressure, which likely included physical coercion, Knox confessed to the crime and implicated Oscar Daniel, his cousin, who was 18 years old. Jane Daniel, Oscar Daniel's mother, was arrested along with other family members. The authorities detained her as part of the investigation into the allegations against her son and nephew. Jane Daniel was suspected of attempting to aid her son and nephew or being involved in some capacity, though there was no substantial evidence to support these claims. Trussie Daniel, the sister of Ernest Knox, and Oscar Daniel, was also arrested. Trussie, who was just a teenager herself, was detained along with her husband. Her arrest was likely driven by the pervasive atmosphere of fear and the desire to suppress any potential resistance or defense of the accused young men. Trussie Daniel's husband, whose name is less frequently mentioned in historical accounts, was similarly arrested. The sweeping arrests were part of a broader strategy to intimidate and terrorize the Black community in Forsyth County. The detained family members, including Jane Daniel and Trussie Daniel, faced harsh conditions in custody. They were subjected to intimidation and possibly violence. These arrests added to the fear and chaos that gripped the Black community in Forsyth County during this period. The trial for Knox and Daniel was swift and marked by intense racial prejudice. Both teenagers were given inadequate legal representation and were tried in a hostile environment. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the confession obtained under duress was used to convict them. After their conviction, Ernest Knox and Oscar Daniel were sentenced to death. However, before the official execution could take place, a mob took matters into their own hands. On October 25, 1912, a mob dragged Knox and Daniel from the county jail and lynched them. They were hanged from a telephone pole in front of a crowd of thousands. Following the accusations against Ernest Knox and Oscar Daniel for the alleged assault on May Crow, the Night Riders, a group who were primarily composed of local white men from Forsyth County and surrounding areas. They were part of a larger movement of white supremacist vigilante groups that operated and intensified their activities. They targeted Black residents indiscriminately, seeking to drive them out of the county. The violence escalated quickly, with the Night Riders burning homes, churches, and schools belonging to Black families. They set fire to Black-owned properties and looted homes. The destruction was meant to instill fear and force the Black residents to flee. The families were given ultimatums to leave the county or face violent consequences. Night Riders would ride through the neighborhoods at night, firing guns and shouting threats. Those who resisted or did not leave quickly enough were often beaten or killed. This included not just men, but also women and children. The terror campaign led by the Night Riders was highly effective in its grim objective. Nearly all Black residents of Forsyth County were forced to flee, leaving behind their homes, land, and possessions. The county became almost entirely white for many decades following these events. Despite the widespread violence and the clear identity of many Night Riders, there were no significant arrests or prosecutions. The local law enforcement and judicial systems were either complicit or indifferent to the violence. This lack of accountability was typical of the era, where white perpetrators of racial violence were rarely brought to justice. The creation of Lake Lanier in the 1950s marked another dramatic shift in the region's history. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers began construction of Beaufort Dam in 1950. The project was part of a broader effort to control flooding and generate hydroelectric power. But the creation of the lake would come at a significant cost to local communities. The flooding of the Chattahoochee River Valley to create Lake Lanier submerged a vast area. This included farmland, forests, and entire towns. Communities that had existed for generations were suddenly underwater. Oscarville was among the casualties. The African-American residents that were left of Oscarville and other communities were forced to relocate. Many received little compensation for their lost homes and land. The displacement caused by Lake Lanier's creation was not evenly distributed. African-American communities were disproportionately affected. The flooding erased physical evidence of their presence and history. Cemeteries, churches, and homes disappeared beneath the waters. The first reported deaths at Lake Lanier occurred during its construction. Workers who were involved in the building of Beaufort Dam faced numerous dangers, and some lost their lives due to accidents, such as machinery malfunctions and drowning incidents. The exact number of fatalities during the dam's construction is not well documented, but these initial deaths set the tone for the lake's tragic history. One of the most well-known tragic stories associated with Lake Lanier involves two young women, Delia Parker Young and Susie Roberts. On April 16, 1958, Delia and Susie were driving in Susie's 1954 Ford towards a local roadhouse. They stopped at a gas station, where they were accused of stealing gas before speeding off. As they drove away, they lost control of the car, and it plunged off the Jerry D. Jackson Bridge into Lake Lanier. For decades, the whereabouts of the car and the bodies of Delia and Susie remained a mystery. Then, in 1990, a construction crew working on the bridge discovered a 1954 Ford in the lake. Inside the vehicle were human remains, later identified as those of Susie Roberts. The discovery of Susie Roberts solved the mystery, but Delia Parker Young's body had already been found earlier. In 1959, about a year after the car went missing, a fisherman discovered a decomposed body floating in the lake. The body was missing both hands and several toes, making identification difficult. It wasn't until Susie Roberts' remains were discovered in 1990 that authorities were able to piece together the story and confirm the identity of the body found in 1959 as Delia Parker Young. The tale of Delia Parker Young and Susie Roberts gave rise to the legend of the Lady of the Lake. Many people have reported seeing a young woman in a blue dress, the same attire Delia was last seen wearing, walking along the Jerry D. Jackson Bridge. This apparition is often described as having no hands, reflecting the condition of Delia's body when it was found. The Lady of the Lake is said to vanish when approached, adding to the eerie and tragic lore surrounding Lake Lanier. In 2012, two brothers, Jake and Griffin Prince, died in a boating accident involving two vessels colliding. This tragedy highlighted safety concerns and led to stricter regulations on the lake. Drownings are common at Lake Lanier due to its large size, fluctuating water levels, and hidden underwater hazards. Many visitors underestimate the risks, leading to numerous fatal incidents. In 2015, Kelly Nash disappeared from his home near Lake Lanier. His body was found weeks later in the lake, with his cause of death undetermined. The mysterious circumstances of his disappearance and death have led to speculation and theories among the community. 17-year-old Hannah Truelove's body was found near the shores of Lake Lanier. Her death was ruled a homicide, and the case remains unsolved, adding to the lake's dark reputation. On July 8, 2012, Kyle Glover, Tamika Foster's 11-year-old son from a previous relationship and singer Usher Raymond's stepson, along with a 15-year-old girl, were involved in a serious accident on the lake. Kyle was struck in the head by a personal watercraft while floating on an inner tube. Usher Raymond was nearby, but was not involved in the accident. Both children were under the supervision of an adult. Kyle Glover was critically injured and was immediately flown to Children's Health Care of Atlanta at Eagleston. He was declared brain dead shortly after the accident due to the severity of his injuries. After being kept on life support for almost 2 weeks, Kyle Glover passed away on July 21, 2012. Several fatal car accidents have occurred near Lake Lanier, often involving vehicles veering off the road and into the water. These incidents contribute to the lake's hazardous reputation. Lake Lanier has also been the site of suicides. The serene yet isolated areas around the lake provide a setting for such tragic events. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the lake saw an increase in visitors, leading to several accidents and fatalities due to overcrowding and inexperienced boaters. Since its creation, Lake Lanier has claimed numerous lives, with estimates suggesting hundreds of deaths due to various causes. The exact number is challenging to determine, but the lake's history is marked by a significant number of tragic incidents. Several factors contribute to the high number of fatalities at Lake Lanier. Submerged structures, debris, and unpredictable water currents pose risks to swimmers and boaters. As a popular recreational destination, the sheer volume of visitors increases the likelihood of accidents. Many incidents involve alcohol, impairing judgment and increasing the risk of accidents. Visitors often underestimate the lake's dangers, leading to risky behavior and accidents. Lake Lanier's history is a mix of natural beauty and tragic events, making it one of the most infamous lakes in the United States. Some believe that the high number of fatalities and unexplained phenomena could be attributed to paranormal activity, especially when considering the lake's history and the existence of submerged structures, including cemeteries. While Lake Lanier has a notorious reputation for accidents and deaths, nearby lakes like Lake Allatoona have significantly fewer reported incidents. This discrepancy raises questions about why Lake Lanier has such a high rate of accidents and deaths. That's why so many believe the lake to be haunted. Although efforts were made to relocate graves, not all were successfully moved. As a result, some graves remain underwater, leading to speculation that disturbed resting places contribute to the lake's haunted reputation. In addition to cemeteries, numerous buildings, roads, and bridges were left behind when the lake was filled. These submerged structures create hidden hazards for swimmers and boaters. Over the years, divers and sonar equipment have occasionally detected these eerie remnants of the past, which seem to appear and disappear with changes in water levels. Boaters and fishermen have reported seeing mysterious lights and phantom boats on the water, only for them to vanish without a trace. These sightings add to the lake's spooky reputation. Stories circulate about entire ghost towns submerged beneath the lake's surface. Some claim to have seen the outlines of buildings or even heard church bells ringing underwater. With the combination what many to believe to be over 700 deaths, some attribute the accidents to the lake's hidden hazards and the sheer number of visitors, and many others believe that the disturbed graves and remnants of the past have left a lasting supernatural imprint on Lake Lanier. Whether or not the lake is truly haunted remains a topic of debate, but the tales and tragedies surrounding it continue to captivate and unsettle those who visit. Do you think the lake is haunted? Let me know. Thanks for watching.